When we are nurturing our spirituality, when we are walking with God, when we are growing in our faith, we are more likely to be able to discern what is appropriate. So in that sense, evangelism is a process. It's a way of being. It's a way of listening to God. It's the way of being who we need to be with others in that particular moment. And that will only come out of our close relationship with God.
God has written 2 books, the Bible and creation. Let's first pause for 2 minutes to enjoy hearing his voice in creation. Hi, today we're going to talk about mission, and I've got my lovely wife with me today, and she's been thinking about mission and what that looks like for the church for many years now. She's done her PhD. So let me introduce you to Sue. Hi, Sue.
Hi.
And we're going to chat together a little bit about what it looks like to be the people of God on mission. So Sue, what do you think mission is? How would you define it?
Well, I think we need to be very careful of the term mission and also of evangelism. They are words that Christians have created based on their reading of the Bible, but they're not actually words used in the Bible. So I think we need to be very careful about the importance we place on those concepts per se. I prefer to think of mission as taking part in God's mission and joining in with the mission of God, rather than being on mission. God's the initiator. We're called to join in with him. God's mission, what is it? It's to reconcile all of creation to him. That does include people, of course it does, but it also includes creation and care for creation. It involves things like speaking truth to power, how the world is run. So I see mission in a much broader sense.
So where does making disciples connect with that definition of mission? How would you see that connection?
Well, we clearly are called to make disciples. That is in the New Testament. Something we need to do, but I think I'd like to place it in a much broader context. So if you'll humour me, I'll backtrack a little bit and talk about some of my PhD research. And in that research, I studied in great depth 4 church-based community initiatives. So there were things like teaching English to new migrants, a sewing club, various training courses that were offered to people in the community. And I was looking at what people thought they were doing and what they were actually doing. Out of these deep observations, I discovered that what people were really doing was pastoral care. I need to at this point backtrack a little bit more and say, well, what is a definition of pastoral care? I think the majority of us would still view pastoral care as either visiting shut-ins or helping people in times of crisis, whereas in fact the accepted definition of pastoral care is very much wider than that. The functions of pastoral care are now widely accepted to include healing, sustaining, guiding, reconciling, nurturing, liberating, and empowering. So they define more the process of walking alongside people, living life with other people, and these functions may come and go as appropriate.
So talk a little bit about those functions. Could you tease out maybe each of those terms a little bit in terms of how you're defining pastoral care as mission?
Sure, in my long answer to what does it mean to make disciples, healing can be being present with somebody who has experienced great pain, great loss. The cure of souls is an old term for this. It's not necessarily, it's beyond our ability to physically heal people a lot of the time, but it's restoring what has been lost, helping to restore what has been lost.
And I suppose kind of being a healing presence with someone.
Yes. And a lot of pastoral care is about being present, being truly present with others. Sustaining, being with others, walking alongside them through difficult times where healing may not be possible, but we can sustain people through dark times. We can sustain each other. We all need this too. Guiding isn't telling other people what we think they should do. Heaven forbid it should ever be that. It's again journeying with people, asking the right questions at the right time, being somebody on whom they can reflect, and helping them work out what steps they would want to take. Reconciling, being a peacemaker, helping people reconcile to, for instance, a loss. There are many different ways these functions can be expressed. Nurturing, think of what a mother does, think of what a good mother does. She creates an environment in which a child is known that they're loved, that they're cared for, an environment in which there's comfort when times are hard, but they also feel that they can take risks because they have the nurture saying, you can do it, you can do it. Believing in them, being a safe place to come back to. That image describes what nurturing is for all of us. Liberating. This one can get a little bit political sometimes. Often people need liberating before they can hear any message of good news. They need somebody to help them get out of bad situations they're stuck in, to use the term politically, liberating from poverty. It's what we're called to as God's mission. Being part of God's mission is to be people, if we're able to help liberate the poor, to be good news to the poor. And empowering is, if we're able, to give people the tools they need in order to flourish. So, for instance, I studied a church group that was providing English conversation classes for new migrants. That was empowering new migrants to live fully in Australian society.
So, but I guess all of that is a long answer about
Yeah,
making disciples.
and I've forgotten the question by the time I'd finished all of that.
But it sounds like you're in the way you're describing pastoral care. It sounds like you're making disciples in doing that.
I think you're modeling discipleship. There's great value in Christians doing pastoral care together as people see how we care for them and how we care for each other, and as we treat each other. We are modeling what Christian discipleship looks like to other people. And I don't think we should ever underestimate the power of modeling, both for good and for bad.
So it's reframing pastoral care not as a role that the pastor has, but a role that we all have. Is that what you're saying?
Most definitely. Most definitely. There are obviously levels of skill in pastoral care. We can be trained in pastoral care, but we are all called to love, and we are all called to look to improve, always be improving our skills and our abilities.
Right.
In this sense too.
So, if mission is pastoral care, does that mean we never share our faith through words, or how does that work?
I believe that the society we live in now, or the Western societies around the world now, are mostly well beyond being able to influence people just with our words. People are very, very skeptical of words. The big appeal to repentance is just not going to cut it with people anymore. I believe that people need to see love in action.
So it's more like they will know we are Christians by our love, rather than by our well-crafted words.
Yes, I do think there's a place for stating our identity as Christians, but that needs to be by invitation from the other person as we build genuine, caring relationships with give and take, where we give and we receive from others. Sooner or later, in any good friendship, statements of identity do come up. It would be very weird, for instance, if I had an ongoing good friendship with someone who was a Buddhist, somebody who was an atheist, and I didn't find out. Sooner or later, these questions of identity, these issues of identity are stated. Then we can respond, well, I'm a Christian, and that really influences what I do and how I am in life. I'm not perfect, but you can see I'm working at it.
Yeah. So what is evangelism then in the midst of all that? How do we reframe that word, or find ways to express that word?
I can't give you a comprehensive response to that, but I do think we could turn the proclamation sometimes on its head, and say, well, it starts with listening, and a lot of the journey is listening. As we have genuine, loving, reciprocal relationships with others, we can create a space that the other person can step into freely, showing us who they are.
Yeah.
And we are then able to respond, maybe by saying who we are. A lot of evangelism, in the sense that I'm talking about it, rests on us being able to discern what is appropriate in the given moment. And the way we discern that is through nurturing relationship with God. It's through reflective practice and supervisory practices, where people sit with us and say, what really struck you about today? Why do you think you felt so strongly at that point? That would be very appropriate for a church-based initiative, and within the bounds of confidentiality.
So what is evangelism?
I think evangelism could be described as a way of being, how we are with others, being in the presence of God. It's good newsing it. It's being good news to people. But it also requires our connection with God. When we are nurturing our spirituality, when we are walking with God, when we are growing in our faith, we are more likely to be able to discern what is appropriate. So in that sense, evangelism is a process. It's a way of being. It's a way of listening to God. It's the way of being who we need to be with others in that particular moment. And that will only come out of our close relationship with God.
That's very different from saving souls and getting converts, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It would be wonderful if that method worked anymore, but if it ever did, but it doesn't. It doesn't. People need to see Christians loving each other, loving others outside of the church, and caring for the world around them. They need to see the genuineness of Christianity. And that just doesn't happen in one meeting. It's not possible.
So are we kind of being a bit dishonest, pretending we don't want people to become Christians or something like that?
I thought you might ask me that. Of course we want people to become Christians. Of course we do. Because we strongly believe that we were created to need God. But we need to still respect other people. We need to give them that space to be who they are to us.
Tell us about a situation where you've experienced that kind of relationship with somebody or that friendship with somebody.
Well, I think of a friend, Kylie, who is transgender, and I met her in a particular situation, and we got chatting over meals, and she worked out that I was a Christian, and I once mentioned, I think, that I was married to a pastor. And she immediately said, she did this with her hands, and she said, no, don't say another word. If you start talking about Christianity, I'm going to get very angry. Just don't get there. So I shut up, and we carried on with the meal. And over time, she disclosed to me that her and her father had gone to a church that could not accept her sexuality, and had really damaged her, had done a huge amount of damage with their control. And they'd got out of there. And eventually Kylie had become a pagan. And she said, look, I don't need to know about Christianity anymore. I'm a pagan. I've found the true way. Well, what can you say to that? Get into an argument. So we were just friends, and we'd often eat lunch or dinner together and just share life. And after a while, just as we'd finish the meal and be going our separate ways, I'd say to her, goodbye, my pagan friend. And she'd say, goodbye, my Christian friend. And we'd laugh about it. And then we both went our separate ways. We haven't seen each other now for a long time. But I'd like to think that I was just a tiny little bit of evidence that Christians are not going to force an agenda on you. She was hurt. That was never going to work with Kylie. She needed to know that Christians could celebrate her as she was. That doesn't mean I was celebrating her paganism. I was celebrating her as a beautiful human being.
So what is the urgency of the gospel then? Is it just we kick back, relax, we don't worry about anything, and all will work out? Or
not at all. I think it's a whole pile of trusting God to be sovereign, and finding out who he would have us be, what he would have us do at any point in time. I think there is an urgency of love. There is an urgency of truly being in the world, not staying back in some sort of Christian ghetto. And even while church initiatives can be good, we also need to do the sort of thing that your community worker in your church, Anne, does, to actually get out there and be the minority person in a group of other people, to not always have the power, to disempower ourselves or to be disempowered by others, and to allow that and to work with that and just be the people God is making us to be, and loving as God is teaching us and enabling us to love others.
Thank you. Well, we've been talking about mission and talking about what that looks like in our current era, particularly in the Western world, in a culture that's a long way from the culture that perhaps some of us grew up with. What it looks like to be the people of God engaged with the mission of God, who is already out there in the world, who is already at work in the world. I've had Sue Holdsworth here as my guest today, and if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, and join with us further, perhaps on my own Facebook group called dchurch.com. Thanks for listening.